Well, while we saw what everyone else was getting up to last time, this time we're following Pike in his effort to save number 1, who's in deep number 2 over her genetic augmentations, which is a violation of the Federation's We're Still Afraid of Khan regulation. It kicks off with young Una having a broken leg but being unable to see a doctor because her Illyrian healing ability will get noticed. Problem is, it might not heal properly otherwise. One of the dangers of super good healing is that sometimes it can get confused and you'll wind up with a second gallbladder or something. In the present, Una is given a choice. In exchange for a guilty plea, Starfleet will allow her to just be dishonorably discharged, and the record sealed so that she would remain a Federation citizen. She doesn't much like that idea. After all she's done, to be thrown away for what she is, that sucks. Luckily, Pike is working to get her a lawyer. Unluckily, it's on a planet where if you're not genetically augmented to survive there, well, it's not a nice place to be. Also, the lawyer doesn't want to talk to him. So Pike decides to play a game of chicken. The specifics...
I don't think that you can.
Try me.
Who is more worried about him dying in this lobby? The balls on this guy, huh? So Nira finally sees him, but says she's not interested in fighting for Una. Pike tries to give a speech, but she makes a sarcastic remark about him finally discovering empathy, right before saying fuck Una in her stupid face. Pike makes the point, though, that if Nira cares about her other clients who are dealing with this, clients who have consistently had things go badly, Pike notes, then this presents a legal and PR opportunity here. So if not for Una, do it for the chance to rub their stinking faces in it. Nira shows up and clearly does not like that Una spent time passing as an unmodified human, especially doing so in Starfleet lately. But Una makes clear that whatever happened before, today, she's here to stand up, not vanish like an Illyrian never contributed so much to Starfleet. So, Nira agrees to go ahead despite their past, and Pike and his captain girlfriend are mad at each other despite their past. He hates that she's going along with this injustice. She's upset because he doesn't see that she doesn't have a choice in the matter. She tried to get Una the best deal possible, but the law won't allow them to just pretend this hasn't come out. And this has pissed off her boss, the Vulcan Judge Advocate General, who shows up personally when the updated changes are handed in, adding 2 counts of sedition to the list, which is bad. Sedition has very few PR spin options to it. I don't think anyone ever based a musical number on it. Without our sedition, our lives would be as shaky as a fiddler on the roof. Sedition! Sedition! After the titles, Nira explains this is what happens when you don't cooperate. The prosecutor's throwing everything at you to make you an example for the next person who is thinking about not taking the deal. You know, for stupid reasons like, but I'm innocent, or I'm entitled to a chance to defend myself. Una wants to go on the stand, but Nira says that's a horrible idea. It won't change anything, and she'll be forced to corroborate the prosecution's assertions. No lawyer ever says, thank God my client spoke to the authorities to clear this whole mess up. La'an brings Nira to Una's quarters to have a place to work from, but takes the time to bring up a landmark case about how evidence procured from an illegal act is inadmissible. It might be applicable, but La'an will have to look into it. First, Pike gets a visit from open bracket look up captain girlfriend's name close bracket, where he laments not being on the witness list for the defense. He shares a story about the one time when he was giving a speech, she came up afterwards to correct him on a mistake, which impressed him because standing up to a captain is a trait that April told him to look for in an officer. It's a great story, which she then follows up by asking when he first learned she was Illyrian. He has to answer if that's asked on the stand, and he has to tell the truth. This is why you often hear people saying they can't recall something under oath. It's easier to prove someone is lying than it is to prove that they can't remember something. Anytime someone suddenly has selective amnesia on the stand, now you know why. Spock talks to the Vice Admiral pushing for sedition, and despite Ortega's jokes that they seem chummy, Dr. M'Benga can see from their body language that they despise each other. Seems that there's some history there. He was one of Sarek's former colleagues. And real tension. I mean, I can't see why, honestly. I loved this guy in Nosferatu. So the trial begins. Captain Battelle gives the usual stuff. Can't play God, can't forget the eugenics war, can't defy the law, can't stop the music. Neera then comes back with the usual response about prejudice throughout history. Everybody knows the steps of the dance. Let's just get down to the questioning of Admiral April here. Despite her impressive service, he has to admit that had he known, he would not have supported Una's application. Neera comes back by listing the times the Admiral violated the Prime Directive, to show the rules aren't always followed. While no one can accuse me of being a PD cheerleader, even I have to admit it's an apples and oranges thing. We're talking about a situation where judgment calls need to be made. I mean, I'm on Una's side here, but I'm not buying the argument that the flexibility of General Order 1 means captains can disregard laws and expect to get away with it. Neera really slams April until he stands up and reiterates that he would have followed the law, and the tribunal is so displeased by her grandstanding, sanctimonious accusations against him that they end this and strike all that crap from the record. In private, Pike tries to smooth things over with a drink, but it seems the Admiral is not thirsty after that. And Una, she is pissed when she realizes Neera's only concern is having a soapbox to spew hatred against the Federation in the vain hope it'll make a future case easier, even if Una has to spend 20 years on a penal colony because she's not being defended. Neera says she's still got a case planned, though, and brings out La'an, Dr. Mabenga, and Spock to serve as character witnesses, who do a bang-up job painting how awesome she is. Spock even goes so far as to say to convict Una would only be Starfleet punishing itself, although it wouldn't be the first time it did something like that. But in private, La'an finally admits to Neera that she, in her anger, may have recorded a personal log about Una's augmentations, and it was found out and used against her. After telling La'an that she has no reason to think she's going to suddenly go all Khan Nooney and sing on everyone at the first opportunity, Neera then adds that it'd take 6 months and a shit ton of red tape to get at that log entry. So unless she's been doing enough shady things to make them do that already, it's not her that gave Una away. It has to be someone who would gain from Una's exposure. But who? It's not to take over as first officer on the Enterprise either, because we know when that job's vacated, it falls to Spock, who is A, on Una's side, and B, didn't want the job in the first place. So who could it be? Let's go on with the court-martial and find out. Neera puts Una on the stand where she explains the meaning of the title, To the Stars Through Hardship, which was the old Starfleet motto, which was adopted to replace the one before that, which was Trip and Archer's Bros Before Hoes. She also discusses what it was like growing up on a Starfleet colony as an Illyrian, and that her family secretly carried out her genetic modifications.
On the condition that all genetic modification was to cease. Is that correct?
Yes. But for other families, like mine, it was our tradition.
Tradition!
But when one of them was outed as having glowing immune systems, he and his parents were arrested, and those who didn't leave the planet were then persecuted. Insults, refusal of service by businesses, even attacks until the point that the city was divided into 2 sections. Una's family, who could pass for non-augmented, went to live among the non-Illyrians. She regrets that, feels guilty about it, which explains the answer to Neera's next unexpected question. Who turned Una in? The answer is that Una herself did, so she wouldn't need to hide, and so that she could feel safe. She feels this is one more way Starfleet can move from being great to being even better. But then Max Schreck decides to question her personally, and first wants to know when Pike learned of her genetic augmentations. She's forced to admit that it was 4 months ago, which he says makes this a conspiracy now, since Pike helped to cover up her violation of the law. She's proof of the fact that her mere presence as an augment is a corrupting influence on others. Next thing you know, someone's going to catch a case of the gays. But Neera brings out the physical copy of the Starfleet Code of Justice and has Captain Battelle read from one specific part of it, because all of Una's testimony backs up one vital point, that she met all the criteria for asylum, and the discretion on granting it was up to Pike. A tribunal can validate or invalidate it, but Pike's actions were within the law. All they have to do is decide whether the law against her or the law in favor of her wins today. The speaker for the tribunal makes a very important point that we don't want to disregard, that there are valid concerns behind these laws, that the situation is nuanced. We don't want a Gattaca situation where the unmodified become an underclass and everyone is pressured into augmenting their children. Nor do we want to lead to superior ability breeding superior ambition. But we also need to exercise flexibility. People do not choose to even be born, never mind the DNA that they wind up being born with. The thing that is simultaneously most human and most inhuman is belief stripping away our empathy. We permit suffering, encourage suffering, even inflict suffering, because we feel we are validated. It's a legitimate viewpoint that genetic augmentation to create a superior being is dangerous. But allowing that view to make us unfeeling merely trades one form of abomination for another. It ceases to be that oppression is wrong, and instead becomes, this is the worst kind of oppression, the kind against me. So the case of asylum is validated and the charges are dropped. While the victory is a technicality, it is a first step towards making adjustments to the law that are less rigid and draconian. Una and Nira have patched things up, and everyone, especially La'an, is pleased at this happy ending. So, time for the time travel. Courtroom dramas are a good go-to because they have the elements that make for engaging storytelling. Stakes, twists, the collision between laws and ethics and even philosophy sometimes. And, of course, speeches. The Measure of a Man of TNG stands out as a shining example of this, in part because it involves what we're all too familiar with in our world. What happens when the pace of technological evolution outpaces the law? In AAPA, rather than the law needing to address what's new, we have the need to redress what's old. The surprising thing about this episode, though, is that the speech goes to a one-off guest star, not a regular or a returning character. Never mind to Pike himself, who you'll recall sat out most of our last episode, and here pretty much disappears after getting into an argument with his girlfriend. The episode had to overcome a challenge as a prequel series, in that we know that unlike The Measure of a Man, new law cannot be created here. So that meant coming up with a way to resolve this issue that was satisfactory. Asylum, it's a bit of a stretch, but not enough to dislocate something. And certainly is better than the alternatives because it would be hard to find any of those that can be done in the light. Making Una a pioneering test case, one on a technicality, preserves the future status of augmentation while nevertheless giving her a victory. This is the stronger of the two episodes, but it's obviously clear why it needed to come second, as without La'an, well, it would feel incomplete. Addressing her ancestry was an organic development of the episode and contributed to its atmosphere. As established, though, next time, it's the time travel. All hail